Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I have several questions in very little time, so I'm going to ask a few at a time and then allow you an opportunity to respond. So the first question is to Dr. Russ. I want to follow up on your testimony about water availability research, where you said that the USGS will develop water budgets to understand how much water is required to produce UOG deposits. So when you are analyzing the suitability of different communities, do you take into account the local economy's water needs, both present and future, to support potential future economic growth? So hold that. And then my next question is to Dr. Teichmann. I know, Dr. Teichmann, yesterday in the Environment Subcommittee, we held a hearing on policy-relevant issues related to climate change. We discussed the impacts of greenhouse gas emissions on the planet, and all of the witnesses who testified agreed that anthropologic climate change is happening and we need to take action to address it. Now, one concern I've heard about hydraulic fracturing is the possibility of fugitive emissions of methane gas. So I wanted you to please describe what the EPA is doing with your ongoing studies into the potential of fugitive emissions of methane from hydraulic fracturing. And then finally, for all of the panel, we've had in the Environment Subcommittee several discussions about stakeholder input, which is an important issue when discussing scientific and environmental and public health issues. Now, obviously, there's been some miscommunication and misinformation regarding hydraulic fracturing. So will you please detail what efforts you've made to get input from stakeholders related to your research plan, and also what you're planning to do to communicate and reach out to the public to ensure that the general public and stakeholders are informed about what you're doing? So starting with Dr. Russ on the water.
Thank you. Water availability and the development of water budgets we feel is a critical component to understand the amount of water that's used actually in the overall operations of hydraulic fracturing and related activities. And yes, the water availability takes a look at all of the uses of water, surface water, groundwater, including the water that's needed to supply normal communities with the waters that they need, whether it's drinking water, irrigation, or whatever. So it does include all of these sources.
And also, do you consider the potential future to support economic growth in a particular community?
Yes, socioeconomics is a part of this study.
Thank you very much. Dr. Teichmann on the
fugitive emissions.
method.
Right. Indeed, that is a concern that we have, but we actually believe the industry shares with us, that we should not have such methane stray emissions occurring as part of the drilling process. And therefore, I believe, although this is somewhat out of my bailiwick, more into the policy side as opposed to the research, that we have a new source performance standard on well completion that therefore would minimize the methane emissions associated with the completion of wells, and such that the material that would be collected by the industry in so saving those methane emissions could actually reap greater benefits than the cost to do so.
Thank you. And for the panel, did you want to add something?
Well, no, I was just going to go to your second question for the
terrific.
panel. And I'll be very brief because I can spend too much time on this. But in part of the EPA drinking water study, just to give you an example, in our development of the study plan for it, there were 4 public stakeholder meetings, an email box set up, public comment was offered on the draft study plan. The SAB consulted and had an opportunity for public comment then from the stakeholders. The SAB had a peer review of the study plan. There were technical workshops, webinar, a docket was set up, a listserv, and that's just on the study plan. We've had the same type of external outreach on our study conduct.
Thank you. Others on the panel, would you please comment on stakeholder input and communication to the public?
Yes, as we've gone through the plans and preparation of our draft research plan, we've had webinars with industry, with states, with academia, and others, non-governmental organizations. We have, in addition, participated in many professional meetings and other community meetings that have asked about what we're looking at, including in our research plan. Particularly, we've worked with states through things like river basin commissions and participated in their meetings to understand the potential effects and water use of hydraulic fracturing. So we take their comments into consideration when we build our ideas for the report.
Thank you. And the others, I have a bit of time left. Mr. DeHoratiis.
Yes, the Department of Energy participated in both the EPA activities and USGS activities, especially in terms of the webinars and presentations that were made. We've had also additional interactions with industry and participated in several, public professional organizations. There are societies that we have given presentations at the Society of Petroleum Engineers and other professional activities.
Thank you.
And I'll just mention a few activities along these lines, not necessarily related to the research plan, but so, for example, the project that I mentioned during my testimony that NIEHS is supporting, they're looking at information needs from the community. So that's one activity. Another is that part and parcel of our standard operating procedures when we work at the sites that I mentioned is to communicate findings back to the community and address any concerns or questions that they might have at that time. And then I would also add that NIOSH works very closely with industry, and the silica example that I mentioned in my testimony have also worked very closely to communicate findings with workers along with the industry partners.
Thank you. And I see my time has expired. Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to ask about the cooperation that you're getting from the industry and get back to the topic of earthquakes, because that's something that we've heard from a couple of members here. And I know that there's a William Ellsworth who is with the USGS or is or was a geophysicist. I don't know if he's still with the USGS, but has written more than 100 papers on earthquakes and reviewed a study. Mr. Ellsworth studied geophysics at Stanford, earned his doctorate from MIT, former president of the Seismological Society of America. When he was asked if there was any doubt among his colleagues about what produced quakes in Arkansas, Colorado, Ohio, Oklahoma, and Texas, he said injection of wastewater into Class II wells has induced earthquakes, including those you cite. In my opinion, it's pretty clear in all of these cases, Youngstown, Arkansas, DFW, Trinidad, and Oklahoma, that injection wells were the cause. So obviously there are people who are experts who are making this connection. Have you been able to get information from the industry that would help you form opinions about that? For example, the amount of water, what they're using, and how they're injecting the water. Thank you.
Yes, I'll take a stab at answering that. This is Dr. Russ. And yes, Dr. Ellsworth is a geophysicist with our offices in Menlo Park, California. He's still very much an active member of that unit. And I think he's done a good job at summarizing and looking at the evidence to support the relationship between the activities, subsurface injection, and earthquakes that you mentioned.
Thank you. And are you, as working on this report and this plan, this research, are you able to get the information you need from the industry about what they're injecting, how much they're injecting, and what their process is?
We've been successful getting some of the information we think is necessary. We would like to have more information of the rates of pumpage, volumes of water injected. In some cases, companies haven't recorded that information, so we're trying to work with the companies and with the Environmental Protection Agency to see how we can improve our ability to get some of that important information.
Dr. Teichmann, do you want to weigh in on this, please?
I would only add to Dave's remarks that as part of our drinking water study, we have 2 prospective studies that we are hoping to have, in which case we will be there measuring baseline data of water quality before fracking occurs at a site, while it is occurring, and even after wells are completed and, in fact, the production is stopped. And we hope by that time to be there and getting the very type of data you're talking about and measuring the potential environmental impact, if any, as we do that.
Well, thank you. And I hope that the industry is cooperative, because the more facts that you have, the more data you have, the more you'll be able to have accurate reports that you can get back to us. Thank you very much.